Couch Courtside with your host Kyle Delaney for CouchFire.co. And this installment, I like to do two specific things. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to bring up the topic of Japanese fighters in the UFC and some of their struggles that they've had. And also, I'd like to break down and predict the upcoming fight at UFC 144 in Japan between Jake Shields and Yoshihiro Akiyama. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hop right into it. So what I want to talk about really is, I just want to say one thing before I start, is that I have a great deal of respect for a lot of these Japanese fighters that come over and test their skills against some of the best in the world. So I just want to say that before I start anything. You know, I think Japanese fighters do put on a lot of great fights, and they really do. They test their skills. But the one thing is that we're seeing is that these guys are not having the success in America that they did have in Japan. A lot of these guys are coming over, and their records are not showing, not living up to the hype that some of these fighters do get from Japan that they come over. So there are guys that are successful. First off, Yoshihiro Akiyama, 10-3 record in the UFC, title fight. He's been a top contender in the middleweight division for a very long time. So he is a very successful fighter. He is the best Japanese fighter in the UFC, hands down. And, Dana White said it as well, and I'm saying this as well, too. He's the best Japanese fighter in the UFC right now based on his record. So what I'm going to do is, a lot of people have their reasons behind this, and not so much excuses, but reasonings behind why these Japanese fighters struggle. And I have three reasons why, just what I think. So this is my honest opinion. So first one I'd like to say is that these Japanese fighters, what I want to say is that the talent pool is not as deep in Japan as it is in the UFC. When you're coming over to the UFC, this is the top promotion. This is the cream of the crop. You're going to be fighting the best fighters, okay, top to bottom. You're getting fighters from all over the world, from the US, from Brazil. You're getting the guys from everywhere. From the UK, you're fighting the best. Now, I'm not questioning, and saying that Japanese fighters are not, all the Japanese fighters who they're fighting are good, but what I'm saying is that there's a big gap between the most talented and, your average gatekeepers. The talent pool is not as deep in Japan, in my honest opinion. Okay, that's the first reason. The second reason is weight cuts. The thing that we're seeing is that a lot of these Japanese fighters are sitting around at their natural weight. A natural weight. I think a good way to put an example in this is that a middleweight from Japan, an average weight would probably be 190, 195. Not that big of a weight cut. Your average American or UFC fighter at middleweight is sitting around at 205, 225. And they're making the weight cut to 185. And, what I'm saying is that, size isn't everything in the sport. Technique is very important, but we're talking about a huge size advantage in this. So, you do get, in regards to the weight cuts, people question whether you lose your cardio or not. So they do keep good cardio, but at the same time is that you're at a very big size disadvantage in this. And, weight cut has a lot to do with this. And we're going to see in this upcoming fight with Yoshihiro Akiyama, he's going from middleweight and he's cutting down for an experimental test at 170. He's going to be fighting at welterweight. So we'll see what it's like when these guys cut, maybe not from their natural weight, but down to the weight that they should be fighting at. Just because you weigh that weight and it's your natural weight doesn't mean that's the division you should be fighting in. So what I'm saying is that maybe some of these guys are fighting in the wrong division. So that's what I have in regards to the weight cut. And lastly, what I'd like to say, just in a couple observations, this is not everybody, but in regards to this, watch a lot of Japanese fighters, and a lot of these guys, they don't really seem to have a game plan when they come to fights. This is not everybody, and the most successful ones, Yoshihiro Akiyama. He's a very skilled grappler. He has pretty good stand-up fighting, but he gets the fight to the ground, and he dominates you because he's a skilled judo fighter. He's got a lot of strength. He uses a game plan, but we also saw him lack a game plan against Anderson Silva. But you're talking about fighting the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, so it is hard to have a game plan. But a lot of these Japanese fighters are coming in, they stand up and they try and bang it out. And, that's good. It puts on a good fight for the fans. But at the same time is that the game of MMA is evolving. And a part of this evolution process is the game plan. You have to have a game plan. If you're a skilled grappler, a lot of Japanese fighters are skilled grapplers, skilled submission guys, good wrestlers, and, they have pretty formidable striking. You got to take the fight to where you're strong, where you're most strong. And that's on the ground. A lot of these guys we're seeing is that that's not what they're doing. That is a part of game plan. So those are my three reasons I have in regards to why some of these Japanese fighters are struggling in the UFC. And I certainly hope that they do rebound. I hope we see the talent pool get bigger, and I hope MMA in Japan gets bigger than what it is right now. And I hope UFC 144 is a great success. break down and predict the fight between Jake Shields and Yoshihiro Akiyama. So I'll just say, Jake Shields. Jake Shields came into the UFC from Strikeforce, highly regarded fighter, fights one time against Martin Kampmann, then he comes and he gets his title shot. He fights GSP, and he's in a 2-fight losing streak right now. He's lost to GSP, he's lost to Jake Ellenberger, and, he's 1-2. And the thing with Jake Shields is, I'm just going to break down his game right now, is that Jake Shields, his stand-up, there's a very big gap between Jake Shields' stand-up and his grappling game. He's one of the most elite grapplers in the game, and I will say that, is that his wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu combination make him very skilled, but his striking has just not improved to where it should be. And some of these guys who are skilled grapplers, some of them just don't grasp striking. And I'm not bashing Jake Shields here, but his striking has not shown continued improvement. He's very stiff in his hands. He keeps them low. And, he does have some power, but his striking, and you figure with his training team, with the Diaz's and with the Melendez's, that his striking would come a long way, but it has not. It has continued to stay the same. He's very robotic with his strike. He's very stiff. He's not loose. He does not really move around much in his feet. But his striking, the thing about his striking is that he has a good chin. He's only been knocked out twice. It allows him to stand up and then set up his takedown attempts. I just wish his striking was better so that it would help his takedown attempts a little bit better. But the thing is that Jake Shields' bread and butter is that his single leg, his double leg, if he gets you in the clinch, he's going to get you down to the mat. His wrestling and his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from Cesar Gracie make him such a skilled grappler. If he does get you to the ground, he is going to dominate you. His ground control is some of the best out there. He'll get you down to the ground. He's going to suffocate. It's not so much that he's always constantly working, like throwing down strikes, but he demoralizes you, is that you really can't get up from the ground when Jake Shields gets a hold of you. He's going to lock you up, he's going to suffocate you, and he's going to wear you down. He'll throw down some strikes, but he's not always constantly working. He does advance guard very well. But the thing is, his wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu make him so skilled on the ground. Jake Shields does have 10 submission victories to his resume. That's very impressive, and it's only going to continue to get higher. The guy is going to find guys in submission. Is that his wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu make him so skilled on the ground. And that's what I have in regards to Jake Shields, in regards to his game. Strengths for Jake Shields, obviously his wrestling with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has a very good chin. He's only been knocked out twice. He's a pretty tough guy. We're talking about a guy that took shots from Dan Henderson and still ended up winning that fight. He does have a reach disadvantage. He has a 72-inch reach to Akiyama's 75, so he will be at a reach disadvantage. Another weakness would also be is that his striking is not what Akiyama's is. There is a big gap between the striking and this one. So that's what I have in regards to that. Now, Yoshihiro Akiyama. Yoshihiro Akiyama is a very balanced fighter. He has very good stand, a guy who has a background in boxing and judo, so his boxing is very good. We're talking about a guy that came in, he gave a good fight to Belcher. He stood up with Chris Lieben and put on a great fight. The thing about Akiyama, he may be 1-3 in the UFC, but the thing about him is that 3 of his fights have gotten fight of the night. Now, the guy is constantly putting on good fights. He's always going to bring it to you. It's not like he's just going to lay back. He's a tough guy. Besides this fight with Vitor Belfort, all 3 of the other fights before that were exceptional fights. He just came out on the losing end, got caught in a submission by Liebman, and, other fights, just didn't get the decision. But he always puts on good fights, and his stand-up striking is great. He has good power. He's now moving down to welterweight, and he was fighting at middleweight, and he had good power at middleweight, so we'll see how his power and his striking are in a lower weight division. He can put combinations together. He's got good speed in his hands. He's a pretty dynamic striker, but mostly uses his hands. Now, here's the thing: is that he's also a black belt in judo, and is that how the clinches are going to be, and how he's going to defend Jake Shields' takedowns will be very interesting. The thing about him is that Yoshihiro Akiyama has more submission victories than he does knockouts. He has 7 submission victories on his resume to his 5 knockouts. So he is very skilled on the ground. But the question is, can he deal with a guy as elite of a grappler as Jake Shields? And can he keep this fight standing? I think if he's going to be successful, he'll keep this fight standing. So that's what I have for Yoshihiro Akiyama. He also does have that reach advantage. So strengths, he has a 3-inch reach advantage, 75 to 72. And he has a big striking advantage in this one. I think his hands, he has more refined striking, he has more, he has the better striking in this fight. I think weaknesses in this, I don't think he has the submission advantage. Even though he does have a lot of submission victories, trying to match Jake Shields' grappling is very difficult. And that's what I have for these 2 fighters. Now, where Jake Shields will be successful in this fight, I think will be on the ground, trying to work in a submission or get a decision, break down Yoshihiro Akiyama. Where I think Akiyama will be successful, I know he's a balanced fighter, but I think if he keeps this fight standing, he will pick apart Jake Shields and test that chin of his. So that's what I have for the 2 fighters. In regards to my prediction, I think what these guys are going to do. It's going to be a pretty entertaining fight. You know, remember Akiyama's fighting at home, and Jake Shields not so much. He's fighting away at 144 in Japan. But what I think is going to happen is, you know, we're going to see a pretty entertaining first round. They're going to test out each other's range, and we're going to see some strikes. I see Akiyama catching Shields in the first round, maybe send him down to the deck. And what I see happening, though, is I see Jake Shields coming out in the second round, getting Akiyama to the ground, wearing him down, and locking in a submission. So how I see this fight panning out, I see Jake Shields defeating Yoshihiro Akiyama via second-round submission at UFC 144 in Japan. That's what I have for this edition of the Cage Side Couch. This is Cal Delaney, signing off.